On this video, I'll be giving you 7 practical tips to help you pass the ADI Part 2 test. I'm Jonathan from Boom Instructor Training. I've been a driving instructor for 25 years. I've been training people to become driving instructors for 20 years, and I run a multiple car driving school. And I'm here to help PDIs and ADIs get the most out of being a driving instructor. If you're watching this video, it's probably because you're thinking about becoming a driving instructor, or perhaps you have an upcoming Part 2 test already booked. Or maybe you just enjoy watching my videos, and I'm very grateful for that. Thank you for watching. So let's start off these 7 tips with tip number 1, which is read the highway code and the DVSA book, Driving the Essential Skills. Now, if you've already passed your Part 1 theory test, then you, I would imagine, have already read those books anyway, but I'm recommending that you read them again. Be analytical about your own driving and be honest with yourself. All you need to do is put into practice the advice from those books. The Essential Skills book explains best driving practice, so all you need to do is make sure that your driving mirrors what that book recommends. So compare your driving standard to the advice from that book. For example, the book recommends best driving practice for approaching any hazard. Do you always consistently approach hazards as the book outlines? If you do, great. If not, then you need to change and improve this part of your driving. If you go through this process of analysing and improving your driving, then you'll be well prepared for the Part 2 test and you'll stand a great chance of passing. Tip number 2, have a defensive style of driving. This means always taking effective observation and having excellent anticipation skills. Always question the actions of other road users. Be prepared for the unexpected so you don't get taken by surprise. Safety is always your priority, so keep calm and make allowance for other drivers' mistakes, and don't get upset when other drivers aren't following the rules. You should always be prepared to hold back and let an aggressive driver go through, even if you have priority. And do this without showing any emotion, allowing plenty of space for other drivers. So you need to be driving with responsibility, care and consideration. Always make sure you maintain a safe following distance and make sure you can easily stop well within the distance that you can see to be clear. Always make sure you're looking and planning well ahead so you can spot hazards in plenty of time, giving yourself as much time as possible to safely respond to any hazards. Tip number 3, be confident within yourself. You are already a very experienced, capable and competent driver, and you enjoy driving. And I know this about you because to be a driving instructor you have to have held a full driving licence for at least 3 years, so you've certainly got 3 years or more experience, and I'm sure that you enjoy driving and you consider yourself a very confident, capable driver. Otherwise, you wouldn't be considering becoming a driving instructor anyway. I've trained loads of people to pass the Part 2 test, and the one thing that they all had in common is that they were all already really good drivers. They just needed to make a few improvements to their driving to bring their driving in line with best driving practice. So be confident. The chances are you are already 85 to 90% good enough to pass the Part 2 test without having had any type of training to prepare for the Part 2 test. So with some learning, practicing and improving, then you will be very capable to pass the Part 2 test. Tip number 4, drive with confidence. Your years of experience need to shine through when you take your Part 2 test. So when you do take your Part 2 test, don't suddenly start to drive really slowly and overcautiously, because this will not impress the examiner. Your driving style should be professional, precise and confident. You know what you're doing. You've got years of experience. It doesn't matter whether you're driving in an urban environment, in a rural environment, whether you're on higher speed roads like dual carriageways or motorways. Nothing will faze you. You're a very confident, capable driver. You know what you're doing. Tip 5, practice all the maneuvers. Of course, you are very experienced at reversing into a parking bay and then driving out of a parking bay, or driving into a parking bay and then reversing out of a parking bay. Just make sure that you're doing this accurately, under control, so keep the car slow, and with good observation. And the same applies for the parallel park, the reverse park at the side of the road, so reversing around a car to park up close and parallel with the curb. And for pulling up on the right hand side of the road, reversing for 2 car lengths and then rejoining the flow of traffic. You are already experienced and capable at doing these maneuvers, but you just need to check that you're doing them accurately, under control, with good observation. So always be aware of your surroundings. And a tip for you on your Part 2 test: if you make a slight misjudgment, for example, you are reversing into a parking bay and you straggle the lines, don't worry about it, it's fine. Just stop, drive forwards, correct your position, and then reverse back into the parking bay. No faults will be recorded if this happens, providing you keep the car under control and you have good observation. You are always aware of your surroundings. Tip number 6, check out the driving test centre and the obvious roads in the vicinity of the driving test centre before you take your Part 2 test. Visit the driving test centre before you take your Part 2 test, go to the car park and check it out. If the waiting room is open, go into the waiting room and have a look. You could even sit down on one of the seats for a minute. It's fine to do this. If there's some people in the waiting room waiting for a driving test, then just take a seat with them. Watch what happens. Watch the examiners enter the waiting room and watch how they meet and greet the pupils, because this will be the same for you when you take your Part 2 test. So by doing this and getting familiar with the driving test centre, when you take your Part 2 test, you'll know exactly what to expect. Also, drive around some of the obvious roads within a 20-minute radius of the driving test centre. The obvious town or city centre roads, the obvious rural roads if there are any in the vicinity of your driving test centre, the obvious higher speed roads such as dual carriageways and motorways. You don't need to know the test routes, it's not necessary, because you are a very experienced and capable driver. That said, it does help psychologically if you are driving on familiar roads throughout part of your Part 2 test. It helps to know the layout of the roads because you'll feel comfortable with those roads if you've already driven on them. So this helps calm your nerves and it helps get your Part 2 test off to a good start. So spend some time preparing, in this case getting familiar with the driving test centre, getting familiar with some of the obvious roads in the vicinity of the driving test centre. But that said, you're going to be very relaxed wherever you're directed to go on your Part 2 test because you're very experienced and you can drive confidently, safely and responsibly on any road that you're directed around anyway. Tip number 7, don't worry if you don't pass first time. You have 3 attempts. Not everybody passes first time. I passed on my second attempt, and I know some really good ADIs who didn't pass until their 3rd attempt. So don't give up if you don't pass on your first attempt or even your second attempt. Just analyse what went wrong and then work at improving that part of your driving. For example, I failed my first attempt at the Part 2 test because I missed a speed limit sign, and I thought the road that I was driving on was a 40 mile per hour speed limit. The traffic was flowing faster than 30 miles per hour and I was just getting dragged along with the flow of traffic. And after about 30 seconds of me driving at about 35 miles per hour, I then noticed a repeater sign and the speed limit of the road was in fact 30 miles per hour. But by then it was too late. I'd already been driving at 35 miles per hour in a 30 limit for about half a minute, and therefore, I'd failed on use of speed. So at the time, that was annoying, but I didn't let it upset me. All I did is I analysed what went wrong and asked myself, what can I do to improve this part of my driving? And I realised that I had a weakness in my driving. I wasn't actively looking for the traffic signs. I needed to scan more, scan left, scan right, in order to notice the traffic signs. And therefore that would help me always be aware of the speed limit. And therefore, when I took my second attempt of the Part 2 test, I'd really worked on this part of my driving. I'd really built that into my driving, and I was actively scanning the road, looking for the traffic signs, actively looking for the speed limit signs. Every time I turned from one road onto a new road, I was looking to see if there was a change of speed limit. And of course, this really helped and improved this part of my driving. And then I passed my Part 2 test on the second attempt. So if you don't pass your Part 2 test the first time or even the second time, just look at it as a learning opportunity and ask yourself, what can I do to improve this part of my driving? Give this video a like if you've enjoyed it, and do subscribe if you'd like to see more videos. This would really help me out. This is a new channel, and liking and subscribing really helps with those algorithms. If you have any additional tips that could be helpful for people about to take a Part 2 test, then please comment down below and let me know what your tips are for passing the Part 2 test. If you'd like to become a driving instructor, check out boominstructortraining.com. There is a link down below. If you're a qualified ADI who would like some help leading up to a standards check, again, check out boominstructortraining.com. I've created a brilliant online video learning course to help people qualify as driving instructors and then stay qualified. Thank you for watching, and remember, when you're teaching pupils, keep it simple and enjoy it.